Well, Senator, thank you for taking the time to join us today. How are you doing?
I'm well. There's a lot of promise in this week of Washington and getting actually things done, whether it's helping our veterans out who suffered from those horrific burn pits, to almost getting this big bill done that's going to cut inflation, cut costs for American families, and deal with a lot of our climate crisis by being
Let's
the
get
biggest
into those
supporter.
specifics of that new bill, talking about the climate aspects, which I know is particularly important in New Jersey, particularly the areas in and around New York and Philadelphia, where pollution is a big problem because of auto traffic. How will this cut pollution? How will this improve quality of life for New Jerseyans?
Yeah, so I fought really hard. There were some provisions that I had a little period there where I thought that we weren't going to make them in, but now we got them in that are all about trying to do things, especially for areas like Patterson, Passaic, Newark, Hudson County, that are high pollution areas, as well as our South Jersey, Philly, Camden areas. And so there's a whole bunch of things, literally billions of dollars, from everything from mitigating pollution around our ports, their proven ways to reduce that, all the way to urban tree planting, which has a more powerful effect of taking that carbon out of the air. So I call them the tens of billions of dollars, over $50 billion for environmental justice issues, dealing with climate change and the impacts right now, as well as looking to the future and lowering America's greenhouse gas
Can you give
causing.
more detail there? And I say that because I think we've heard a lot about the subsidies for greener power and subsidies for greener vehicles. Is this carbon capture? What is this exactly?
Yeah, so we've learned that there's a lot of technology that can be used at ports, whether it's resources. A lot of the pollution, Newark Elizabeth Port is the third busiest port in America. It has a tremendous emissions problem, and that's coming from trucks. That's coming from ships themselves. It's coming from loading it onto planes, which fly in and out of Newark Airport, for example. And so this is doing a lot to invest in the technologies that reduce emissions from those vehicles, helping to switch to a lot of practices that shut those vehicles off, not idling. So a whole bunch of evidence-based practices that are going to lower emissions in and around our port area and facilitate the introduction of non-carbon causing elements of our transportation infrastructure.
Let's talk about the prescription drug aspect of this. What can you tell me about, as we get more specific into the guts of the bill? We always hear about EpiPens being expensive and diabetes medication, insulin being expensive. Are we getting after those staples that people really need to survive?
Amen. And that's a little bit of the blocking and tackling I'm still working on right now. But Americans spend an egregious amount of money on prescription drugs. While insulin here might cost $100, name your country from Canada to Europe, it's costing a terrible a fraction of that. And so what we're doing is we're attacking a lot of the reasons of why these prices are going up, putting limits on the ability for people to be gouged by insurance, by what's called PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, and the other people that take out of this and drive up the costs. There's something called a rebate system, which sounds great, but it's not a rebate for people that are buying. It's, again, a way these insurance companies, the way that these pharmaceutical companies and PBMs play. So we're finding ways to get into the guts of why we pay the highest prescription drug costs pretty much in the developed world. And so this is going to mean something. I got my staff to pull exactly to consumers. How much is this going to save when it comes to your energy costs and your pharmaceutical costs? And we're looking at New Jerseyans on energy as well as pharmaceuticals as getting close to 10% shavings on your monthly living expenses, which is pretty significant at this time of rising costs.
I don't mean to ask a rude question, but one Jersey guy to another Jersey guy, a lot of my friends back in Jersey, I live in the city now, have said, okay, this package looks interesting. How are the Democrats going to blow it? So to those, I mean, I gotta ask, I gotta ask the question.
I'm glad that when I played football for Stanford, we beat Notre Dame, and then they'd say, okay, how are you going to blow it when you play San Jose State? Look, the reality is we have got the votes. One more Democrat has to sort of agree, and that's Kyrsten Sinema. But Manchin is pushing this. And I think what really has helped Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin, and even other Democrats like myself to really be enthusiastic about this is the same big named economists that were criticizing things that we did before that helped New Jersey. Got more money for police officers, got more money for our restaurants, got stimulus checks. You had people like Larry Summers, famous Harvard economist, saying, oh, that's too much money being pumped into the system. Well, now Larry Summers is coming out and saying this will cut inflation. It's why it's called the Inflation Reduction Act, and lower prices. It's a unifying bill for Democrats. So I actually believe we're going to get this done. Hopefully you and I can talk maybe next week. And you can say, Cory, you did it, or check me on it. But I have a high degree of confidence we're going to land this. And New Jerseyans will get, again, we pay a lot of money in federal taxes. We're going to get billions of dollars of investment to lower our pharmaceutical costs, to invest in our cleaner atmosphere, invest in lower cost energy for us, and more. Right. Well, so let's just start with the fact that what the Supreme Court did is a radical departure from decades and decades of precedent. It's a radical departure from the majority of the American public, significant 70 to 80% of folks who want women to have access to health care, to abortion care, reproductive rights. You saw this in Kansas yesterday, a bright red state where the people who are protecting women's rights to access safe and legal abortion, they won that by 18 points. I win my elections well in New Jersey, double digit, but I haven't gotten to 18 points yet running for senator. So this was a wildly popular in a red state. If anything that should show you is that this Supreme Court is in a radically out of step with where America is. What Joe Biden is about to do is to take steps and actions. And again, we have not been fully briefed on what he's going to announce, but he knows that there are states like New Jersey that are going to incur more costs, especially as people come from other states to access reproductive care. And so I think he's going to do a lot of things to ensure that interstate travel, which you have red state legislatures now saying that they're going to try to do things to stop. We want to make sure that states like us, safe haven states, have the resources for expanded costs that we might face that often inure to our Medicaid or Medicare costs. So I think there's going to be a lot of very constructive, thoughtful things. But what really needs to be done is for us to pass legislation codifying Roe v. Wade, which was the law of the land for almost 50 years. Most Americans want Roe v. Wade to be codified by their federal government.
Is there anything that you see happening this session, or is this really, at this point, as much as it's important health care to many women, an election issue? You get 2 more senators, you get this done.
Yes, so if we get 2 more senators, I think we'll be able to figure out a way to overcome the filibuster and send it to the House. But we cannot forget those House races. Andy Kim, Tom Malinowski. You're voting not just, Democrat, Republican. You really are voting for, do I want Mitch McConnell and McCarthy to control the House and the Senate? They've already said they're going to entertain a federal abortion ban, which would ban it in our state. So that is on the ballot. And New Jerseyans, when they're going to vote, from Josh Gottheimer to Mikey Sherrill to Andy Kim to Tom Malinowski, they have to decide, do I want to put Republicans in charge who've told us what they're going to do, or do I want to have a majority in the House and the Senate that will pass a bill to preserve a woman's right to access an abortion? Should she choose make that decision and not let politicians make it for her?
A quick roundup of a couple other business things, not as in-depth here at the end, and then I'll let you go enjoy the rest of that lunch you were talking about. Police reform. I know you were heavily involved in this. Josh Gottheimer, I believe, the congressman, just put out some sort of proposal. Is that going to break the logjam here? Have you seen anything that's more encouraging, or are we still kind of stuck?
Well, Gottheimer's been great. And I mean, really, Josh Gottheimer and I have been working very hard these last few weeks to try to get something up that would get struggling New Jersey towns resources from their federal government to get police officers on the street. We support that. We also want to make sure, though, that there's some level for the federal investment of accountability and transparency in that. And so that's the balance. We passed bills out of the Senate to give more resources to New Jersey towns, but we've got to be able to marry that with something that's going to work in the House. And the key thing that Josh has been doing, pulling together police unions as well as progressive groups, is it's got to be a good balance between accountability, transparency, as well as resources for public safety. And then the final thing that I'm really proud of that we've worked on in the Senate, because you know that there were 10 Democrats, I was one of them, and 10 Republicans that came together on gun violence and made the first step forward that we've seen in decades on reducing gun violence. The investments we made in giving more access to on mental health interventions, so that it's not police officers going necessarily on mental health when someone's having a mental health crisis, but trained professionals. They're called co-responders. There's a lot of things we have done that will make even New Jersey, which has very good gun laws, but even safer for our citizens and our police officers who are put at risk every day with the proliferation of guns in America.
And I'll end with a bill I know you feel strongly about, but there hasn't been much movement on. That's federal marijuana legalization, or at least decriminalization. So what's going on there? What's the latest? What can you tell me?
The latest is I'm actually gaining enthusiasm. You know, since I've got here, this prohibition on marijuana has particularly hurt low-income minority communities. There were more marijuana arrests in, say, like 2019 for possession than there were all violent crime arrests combined. And so we are wasting so many resources. What we need to do is decriminalize this on the federal level. Let states do what they want. New Jersey's passed its laws. Let them tax it, let them regulate it, and find ways to do what I call restorative justice, which is expunging people's records for doing things that 3 of the last 5 presidents admitted to doing, and finding a way to balance the justice scales. It is actually moving. We have more and more senators coming on to the major bill, and now more Republicans stepping up, looking to help us perhaps land a compromise.